Hi, I'm Rick Harsh, and this is my booktube. Today, I would like to get across the importance of the publication of Roberto Arlt's The Seven Madmen and the Flamethrowers, or as I like to call it, The Seven Madmen, the Flamethrowers. That "and" is a little bit confusing. I think I've talked often enough about the story, but in case you don't recall or don't know the story, the book was written in 1929 and called The Seven Madmen, but it was halted about halfway through, and it was announced that further adventures of these characters would be in a volume called The Flamethrowers, but it was actually a continuation of the same novel. In 1931, you got The Flamethrowers, 1929, The Seven Madmen, which confused the easily confused literati of the United States. And so the book came out as The Seven Madmen only. And when it was retranslated, why it was retranslated, well, I know a little of the story, but I don't know it all that well, and it's not that important. But it was retranslated, and although a couple real enthusiastic Arlt readers and supporters wanted the company that was, I think it was Serpent's Tail, was going to hire a new translator to translate The Seven Madmen. They wanted, why translate The Flamethrowers? That's not been translated. But no, they wouldn't do it. So again, The Seven Madmen was translated. And I don't know if I'll get into this today or not, but there are reasons why you don't translate that twice. It's impossible to do it well, because for one thing, it wasn't meant to be translated twice. It wasn't. That's nonsense, isn't it? Okay, what I'm trying to say is, I'm going to have to say it now, because that otherwise I'll be too confused. The reason is a lot of his characters have names like the astrologer. There's also Remo Erdosain. He doesn't have, a description for a name, but there's also the lame whore, the man who saw the midwife, the humiliated man. There are many men and one woman in here who have their own name and their descriptive name, and there's some that just have the descriptive name. And anyway, if you're the second translator, when you have the melancholy ruffian, one of my favorites, how do you translate that better than the melancholy ruffian, which any reader of Spanish would tell you is perfect? I think the second translator used the melancholy thug. Well, it's just not the same. The first translator, Naomi Lindstrom, did a beautiful job, and she did all the right things in terms of the names, and this other guy was just stuck. And his translation is probably fine. His name is Castor. But the problem was that nobody translated The Flamethrowers until Larry Riley, who worked for the Coast Guard and then the post office. I don't think he went to a university, and he never learned Spanish. He read the Naomi Lindstrom translation of The Seven Madmen, like I did, and loved it, like I did, and really looked all over for The Flamethrowers, like I did, and couldn't find it. And whereas I then said, oh, what do I do? What can I do? Larry learned Spanish and translated it himself just so he could read it. He was told by, I believe Naomi Lindstrom was helping him and was very, very kind to him, read his translation and said, well, it's not quite there, or something like that. Maybe over a dozen years went by before I met Larry, and he sent this manuscript to me. And I read the manuscript. I read 2 pages, and I said, my God, this is Arlt. There's something very, very particular about Arlt that cannot be put into words. It's ineffable. And Larry caught it. And so I told him, look, let's work together on making this as presentable as possible because you have his voice. And so eventually that happened. And various things went wrong with another press that tried to put the two together. I don't want to get into that right now because it makes me angry. Because various things were ugly about the process. And the main thing is that I got finally permission to do it myself. And I'm not interested in the glory because I didn't write the book. I'm interested in having the book and making the book available. And I used the help of two writers who are from Colombia and whom we published in Spanish. And I know that seems crazy because, we don't have a Spanish readership. But maybe we'll get one someday. But I also want these books to get some attention. And eventually maybe we'll get these translated. But I'll do a separate booktube on these two writers and more on the obligation of all presses to bring, as long as English is absurdly the imperial language of literature, I think we all English language publications have the obligation to produce books in their original language. For, even Jeff Percy's one of our writers, and he reads a lot of Estonian authors. And I think maybe, to put my money where my mouth is, I'm going to have Jeff Percy choose an Estonian writer, and we're going to publish that person's book in Estonian. And I guess it'll only sell to Estonians. And but I think that we have that obligation. And I may lead the way, and I don't expect anyone to be behind me when I look back. So I won't look back. We're going to publish another couple of books by these guys. Now, I kind of got carried away there, and I think probably, now that you've got a good look at this book, and I've babbled a little bit, but to a couple of points that are very important to me, but I think we could now use a musical interlude. Por una cabeza by Carlos Gardel, also from Argentina.
Por una cabeza de un noble motizo que justo en la raza afloja al llegar y que al regresar parece decir no olvides hermano, cosa de tu hay que jugar. Por una cabeza me te pondí un día de aquella coqueta y risueña mujer que al jurar sonriendo el amor que va mi tierno quema en una hoguera todo mi querer.
Por una cabeza.
Toda la locura, boca te besa, borra la tristeza, calma la amargura. Por una cabeza, cielo mi olvido.
Now that we're back from our musical interlude, Por una cabeza. I would like to say first, before we go into the book, that at Corona Samizdat, we've been using a great printer that is going out of business, going bankrupt, and this will be one of their last books with us. And we were lucky to find this magnificent painting, drawing, collage by an artist from Piran called Vasco Vidmar. And as a friend of ours, and it was his girlfriend, the Hungarian Berus Vilango, who did the drawings for this book. That's her version of James Joyce. Okay, and anyway, he did an opening in Isola, and we went because it was in Isola, it was 2 blocks from here, and I saw this painting, and immediately I thought, that is for Arlt. But then we also put the man with the dog's head and the gas mask on the front. We had some different ideas for what would go here, but once you see this, you can't use anything else. Equally good, if not better, for me and for Zach Tanner, who put the book together, would have been the phosgene plant drawing that's in the book. But the authors that I mentioned who helped us with the book, Adolfo Villaforte and Roberto Segroff, these guys, well, they got emotional over that, and so did I, actually. I mean, I just love it so much. But I'm not going to do a conventional book review. If it might even be too late. But that's not what you do with Arlt anyway. Arlt was as unconventional as they get, and I don't think he would like being called anything, except the Triestino, because his mother was born in Trieste. His father was from Poznan, and he was born in Buenos Aires. This is the world that he came in. He was born in 1900 on April 2nd, my daughter's birthday. I told her today, and she said, "Oh," but I don't know if she knew. She didn't ask why. But I say all this in preparation for the first thing that I'm going to do from inside the book. The first thing you encounter in the book is my letter to Roberto Arlt. And I'm going to read that because it's not very long, and because it's important, and it can lead me to say a little something about the book. Dear Roberto, fucking hell, how was I supposed to know I fell in love with a lame whore? Imagine half a woman lying on the bed. She was all sea sorrow shapely, as you would expect, so it did not occur to me to turn her. But when I was finally told I must, and found she was a half, I was not horrified, because you had prepared me. You had laced her with the horror that I accepted in full long before I knew what horror was. Melancholia is the stream of genius you used to prepare your readers, and your misdirection, the melancholy ruffian, was a brilliant decoy. For ignorance akin to somnolence is required for your scheme to work. It's a shame you underestimated the adamant stone of which our ignorance is made. So now you are dead enough to recognize your world in which we live. And of course, no tragedy is more durable than the illimitable incarnations of Erdosain, that melancholia without anatomy, the triumph of the jellyfish. Rick. That may seem a very personal letter, but that's the way that people who are touched by Arlt, it becomes very personal. This Roberto just finished reading the book for the 10th time, and you know, I want to explain about the lame whore and the half. That's the lame whore, of course, is the Seven Madmen. I thought that was the whole book, and then I only later found out it was only half a book. That's what I'm referring to there. Erdosain is the saddest character in literature, in a way. Maybe one of the maddest as well, but one of the saddest. And his sadness in the first book is what strikes you most deeply. The melancholia of Erdosain exceeds that of the ruffian by a great deal. Until the chapter, which is one of the best in all literature, in which, well, it's called the Death Agony of the Melancholy Ruffian. I read that once on this channel, I think. And so I just wanted to explain a little bit of what I was getting at here, but I also wanted to demonstrate the personal feelings. And I'll underscore that with a reader's note by Adolfo Villafuerte, the author of Entre Lunas. Adolfo writes, "When I first read about Arlt, I was in my early 20s and overflowing with rage. The constant exertion of survival in dire conditions had turned me into a brutal young man, especially regarding my outlook on life. Reading about Arlt's life and personality, along with some excerpts from his work, like the famous 'We will create our own literature not by talking about literature, but writing in proud solitude books that encapsulate the violence of a cross to the chin,' from his prologue to his own Los Lanceamas, made me think that he was the perfect writer for me. I was right, but in a different sense than what I had thought. When I finally got my hands on a copy of Los Siete Locos, I found something of myself that I realized I had, to some extent, lost. An indignant rage does not come out of the void, but from disillusionment, mainly. Arlt's characters and prose embody disillusion, which in turn yields this kind of literary violence he alluded to in his prologue. So first I started trying to copy the intensity of his prose, to little avail. Then I began the process of self-exploration that his work invited, of understanding my own anger. I found others of Arlt's generation, of course, the one just before the lofty antics and occasional gimmicks of the Latin American boom, still so omnipresent when I first started reading, such as Juan Rulfo, Felisberto Hernandez, Juan Carlos Onetti, and many others that frolicked in the furious miracle of quotidian heroism, and it was among them that I found the place I was looking for." That's what he says, and I think it's very interesting. Then there's another explanation that, as the editor, I was required to make. And then we get a truly remarkable introduction to The Seven Madmen by Roberto Segroff, called Inventor or Poet. And I mean, I can't read that, it's too long. And we have another preface by Giuliano Vivaldi, who is a translator of Russian and a Russian film aficionado, who was in Trieste and discovered Arlt and who he could not find in the version he wanted, the Italian version. So he went to the National Library in Rome from Trieste, a long way, and photocopied it. And also once tried to get a translation sold. I think he went to Serpentale Press, as a matter of fact. And he writes, he's very knowledgeable about Italian events, and so we have another introduction by him. And then we go to the three introductions that I wrote for the Flamethrowers. And then we have Larry Riley's translator's introduction. And then we have Roberto Arlt's introduction. And then we have The Seven Madmen and the Flamethrowers, interrupted only by the brief note at the end of the Seven Madmen saying, "The Flamethrowers are coming." And that's the way he wanted it. Everything we've done throughout is the way that Roberto Arlt wanted it. Now, I don't know if I've alluded enough to what I would most want you to take away from this book, but I think probably that it's more personal. My favorite book in English is Moby Dick, but I don't feel close to Herman Melville. I love Moby Dick. I've read it again and again and again. I don't know how many times. Not 10, under 10. but Arlt speaks even to me in a different way. I feel closer, much closer to Arlt. But maybe that's partly, no, it's not just that, but maybe it's partly that he wrote in this century, and he wrote in last century, but in a century that I spent most of my life in, likely, and the century that had its extraordinary uglinesses, here's one of my favorite lines. I couldn't find another quote that I wanted that was something to the effect of Erdo saying, "For once was happy," and he felt so happy he wanted to find someone to beat up to show God how much he loved him. But this is another scene towards the end of the whole novel. It says, and all of a sudden a scream burst involuntarily out of Erdo saying, "But I love you, life! I love you in spite of everything you've done to make men ugly!" He smiled in the darkness, and then he fell asleep. The director motioned me. Was that too loud?
A little bit.
A little bit too loud. Well, but it said scream. I mean, hi, Suleiman. It brought the dog here, too. The importance of the book I get to in my introductions here, I believe. Some of the importance in terms of the politics and the social commentary. But this is, I always wonder, what is a visionary? What do they mean, visionary writings? This was a visionary. I know now who was a visionary. This is prophetic fiction. He wrote very much because of World War I. He wrote what he wrote the way he wrote. And you see the dog with the gas mask. The dog-headed man with the gas mask. And there's terrorism, plots, and throughout you get his prose, which talks about angles and you get the inanimate force of the change towards ugliness that was the 20th century, and you get it in his prose, in the industrialized, post-industrialized, or result of industrialization that came. You get the mass destructive weapons, and it's all here, and it is one of the most extraordinary books ever written, and it's a shame that because of money, it wouldn't be a surprise to Arlt or any of his characters. The melancholy ruffian, he talks about his exploitation of women, and in terms of comparing it to the exploitations of capitalism. It's a strong argument, but insufficient, of course. And anyway, Arlt was ahead of his time, and well, I love this man, this writer, this person. I feel him. He's in this book, and I don't think anything else I do as a publisher will come close to finally getting this into print. And I need to thank Zach Tanner for making it look the way that I wanted it to look, inside and out, being patient with all the changes that I myself foisted on him at the invited behest of Adolfo Villafuerte and Roberto Segroff. I need to thank them as well, and everyone who has supported my press long enough for me to get this done. Now we will be on to supporting other writers. I don't think there's another one that will match him in historical importance. Now let's get on with the new. We're gonna publish Gary Amdahl. We're gonna publish another Damon Roy. We're gonna publish Tim Conley. We're gonna publish Tim Conley, and we're gonna publish Iris Broussard. The Broussard line is going to go on, and Zach Tanner, another new writer. Now we move towards the future of writing. The past, I'm happy. Thank you. That's clapping. Good night, and have a pleasant yesterday. Por una cabeza. La 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 la.